Growing up, I was invisible in my own house. My sister, Emily, was the so-called golden child. Every achievement she had, no matter how small, was celebrated like a national holiday. She got flowers for winning a spelling bee, a new phone for passing a math test, and constant praise from my parents for simply existing. Meanwhile, I could be drowning in accomplishments and they wouldn't even glance at me. I once won a regional art competition, and when I brought the trophy home, my mom said, "That's nice, but let's not distract your sister before her piano recital." That moment burned into my memory. As we grew older, it only got worse. Emily got into an Ivy League school, and my parents mortgaged part of their future just to fund her tuition, bragging to every relative like she was the second coming of Einstein. I, on the other hand, had to work 2 part-time jobs while attending a state university, paying for my own education because, according to my dad, we can't spread ourselves too thin. We need to invest where it counts. That was his way of saying Emily was worth it, and I wasn't. Fast forward to adulthood. Emily landed a cushy corporate job through one of Dad's connections, while I quietly built a tech startup from scratch. Nobody in my family ever asked what I was working on. They just assumed I was struggling. At family dinners, they'd ask Emily about her promotions and vacations, while I was treated like background noise. I never corrected them, never bragged, never let them peek behind the curtain of what I was building. Instead, I let them believe I was the disappointment. If you Devon every 20, then came my revenge. Last year, my company got acquired for a massive amount. I became a multi-millionaire overnight. I didn't say a word. I let my family continue pitying me, pretending I was barely scraping by. Finally, during our annual holiday dinner, my parents made another grand toast for Emily, praising her for buying a new condo and saying she carried the family name with pride. That was my moment. I simply pulled out my phone, opened the news article covering my company's acquisition, and slid it across the table to my father. The silence that followed was delicious. My parents' jaws dropped, and Emily's smile froze. The article described me as the founder and visionary behind a company that had just sold for over $50 million. My uncle broke the silence with a loud laugh and said, "All this time you ignored the wrong child." My mom tried to stammer some excuse, but I just looked at her and said, "Don't worry, I'm used to being overlooked." Then I raised my glass to Emily and added, "But hey, congrats on that condo." The dinner ended awkwardly, and for the first time in my life, the praise wasn't directed at my sister. Everyone wanted to talk to me, ask me questions, and understand what I'd been doing all these years. I gave them polite answers, but kept my distance. I wasn't there to make them feel better. I wanted them to sit with the weight of their favoritism and regret. Now, Emily avoids me at family gatherings, and my parents walk on eggshells. I don't hate them, but I'll never forget how they made me feel invisible. My revenge wasn't screaming or fighting. It was letting my success speak louder than their neglect. And the look on their faces that night, that was worth every second of being underestimated. After that holiday dinner, my family couldn't look at me the same way. For years, I had been the quiet one in the corner, the forgotten sibling who didn't measure up to Emily. But now, suddenly, I was the one everyone wanted to know about. My phone buzzed the next day with calls from my mother, then my father, and even Emily herself. I didn't answer. I wanted them to sit with the silence they had given me for so long. A week later, my parents invited me to dinner, just to talk. I almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. When I walked into their house, the same house where my accomplishments had once been dismissed, I could feel a strange shift in the air. My dad greeted me with a forced smile, my mom practically hovering, offering me tea, snacks, anything. It was almost comical. Then came the words I knew were inevitable. My father cleared his throat and said, "We didn't realize how much you had achieved, and we're proud of you." The irony almost made me laugh. I replied calmly, "You didn't realize because you never bothered to look." Their faces tightened. For once, they had no defense. Emily sat across from me, arms crossed, eyes full of something between jealousy and disbelief. Finally, she snapped, "So what? You got lucky?" One deal doesn't erase years of hard work I've put into my career. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "The difference is, Emily, I worked for mine without a safety net, without parents who treated me like a queen, and I didn't need to trample anyone to prove my worth." With levers and tangent and respiring, the silence after that was suffocating. My mom whispered my name like she wanted me to stop, but I didn't. For once, I wasn't holding back. A few days after that tense dinner, Emily called me out of the blue. Her voice was syrupy sweet. the kind she used whenever she wanted something. She said she wanted to catch up properly, just the two of us. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a trendy cafe she chose, the kind of place where she could show off being successful. The moment I sat down, she cut to the chase. "Listen," she said, leaning forward. "Since you've come into this money, maybe you can invest in my new business idea. It'll really help me get ahead." She smiled, like it was already decided, like I'd just hand over a blank check. I took a sip of my coffee before answering. "Interesting. And why would I do that?" She blinked, confused, as if no one had ever questioned her entitlement before. "Because we're family," she said quickly. "And you owe me." That last part made me laugh out loud. Owe you? For what? For years of being the only one our parents cared about? For every time my achievements were swept under the rug so you could shine? Her face flushed red. She hadn't expected me to call her out so directly. Emily tried to regain control, lowering her voice and saying, "Look, I know things were unfair, but this is your chance to make it right. Help me succeed too, and people will see you as generous, not bitter." I leaned in close and said, "The difference between us, Emily, is that I don't need people to hand me opportunities. I create them, and I'm not going to bankroll your ego." Then I stood up, left money on the table for my coffee, and walked out without looking back. For the first time in her life, Emily had nothing to say. It didn't take long for Emily to strike back. A week later, I started getting strange phone calls from colleagues and business contacts, asking if certain rumors were true. At first, I was confused, but then it all made sense. Emily had started spreading lies about me. She told people I hadn't built my company myself, that I stole ideas, that the acquisition was a fluke and I was nothing more than a lucky fraud. What she didn't realize was that I had anticipated something like this. I knew Emily too well. Her jealousy always turned venomous when she wasn't the center of attention. So, I had quietly prepared. Months earlier, I had given an in-depth interview with a respected magazine that was set to publish soon. It detailed my years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the setbacks, and the grit it took to build my company. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The article dropped 2 days after Emily started her smear campaign. It went viral. Overnight, people were sharing my story across social media, praising me as a self-made success. Meanwhile, the rumors Emily had tried to spread collapsed under the weight of documented facts and glowing testimonials from people I'd worked with. When I saw her at the next family gathering, she looked furious, but trapped. My parents avoided the topic, clearly embarrassed by her behavior, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. I leaned over during dinner and said quietly, "The more you try to tear me down, the higher I'll climb. Careful, you might end up buried under the weight of your own jealousy." She didn't respond. She just clenched her jaw and stared at her plate. For the first time, Emily wasn't untouchable. Emily's jealousy finally boiled over at our cousin's wedding a month later. The whole family was there, plus plenty of distant relatives and old family friends. Basically, the perfect audience for her. During the reception, when people naturally started asking me about the article and my work, I noticed Emily hovering nearby with that fake smile plastered on her face. Then, out of nowhere, she clinked her glass and stood up like she was about to give a toast. Everyone quieted down. Emily raised her voice and said, "I think it's important we all remember that success doesn't always mean someone earned it. Sometimes it's just luck or the right connections." She glanced straight at me, her words dripping with venom. The room went tense. I didn't flinch. Instead, I stood slowly, holding my own glass. "You're right, Emily," I said calmly. Every eye now locked on us. Success isn't just about luck. It's about discipline, perseverance, and the ability to rise without a safety net. Some people get handed everything and still struggle to stand on their own. Others build from nothing, and their work speaks louder than any bitterness. The crowd erupted in murmurs, and I could see relatives nodding, even clapping softly. Emily's face turned crimson. She sat down abruptly, her toast backfiring in the worst possible way. The rest of the night, people avoided her while they came up to congratulate me. Later, as I was leaving, Emily stormed up to me and hissed, "You think you're better than me now?" I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "No, Emily, I've always been better. You just never noticed." A few weeks after the wedding disaster, Emily made her last desperate move. She dragged our parents into the middle of it. One evening, I got a call from my mother, her voice trembling. "Can you come over? We need to talk." Against my instincts, I went. When I arrived, Emily was already there. sitting on the couch with a smug look, like she had already won. My dad cleared his throat and said, "Your sister told us you've been cruel to her, that you're holding grudges and refusing to help family when you easily could." My mom added softly, "We just don't want to see this family torn apart." I stared at them for a long moment, then turned to Emily. "So now you're the victim?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "I'm just telling the truth. You're being selfish. You have more than enough money to support all of us. Don't you think it's time you gave back to the family that raised you?" That's when I laughed, sharp and bitter. "The family that raised me? You mean the family that ignored me for decades? That poured everything into you while I was left to fend for myself? You want to talk about selfish? Look in the mirror." My parents sat frozen, guilt flashing across their faces. Emily tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. "I don't owe you a cent, Emily. Not you, not them. Every dollar I have, I earned while being treated like I was nothing. And now that I've proven myself, you all come crawling, demanding a piece of it." Into Zaquair's on-rings. The room went dead silent. Emily's smirk faltered. My dad shifted uncomfortably, and my mom's eyes filled with tears. For once, no one had a comeback. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, "I'm done letting you rewrite history. From now on, I choose who deserves to be in my life. And entitlement isn't a ticket in." Then I walked out, leaving them speechless in their own living room. Word about that confrontation didn't stay contained in my parents' living room. Within days, the rest of the family knew. My aunt called me first, then my cousins, each of them saying the same thing: they were tired of Emily's entitlement too. Apparently, she'd been hitting them up for loans and favors for years, always with the same excuse: "I'm the one carrying the family's legacy." At the next big family gathering, the shift was undeniable. For the first time, people weren't circling around Emily. They were coming to me, asking about my work, telling me how proud they were, finally acknowledging the years I had been ignored. Emily sat off to the side, barely holding back her scowl as relative after relative walked past her to speak with me. Then it happened. My uncle, who never minced words, stood up during dinner and said loudly, "It's about time we give credit where it's due. Emily, you've had enough of the spotlight for a lifetime. The real success story in this family is sitting right there." He pointed directly at me. The room filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. Emily tried to protest, her voice shaking. "That's not fair. I've worked just as hard." But my aunt cut her off. "No, Emily, you were carried. He built himself from the ground up." The look on Emily's face was a mix of rage and humiliation. She pushed back from the table, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. No one followed her, not even our parents. For the first time in my life, the family didn't see me as the other child. They saw me for who I really was. And Emily? She was finally forced to taste the one thing she'd never experienced in her golden child life: being overshadowed. A week after that gathering, my parents invited me over again, this time without Emily. I could hear the heaviness in my mom's voice when she called, and curiosity pulled me there. When I walked in, both of them looked older somehow, like the weight of years had suddenly settled on their shoulders. My dad started speaking first, his voice low. "We need to apologize." The words didn't come easily to him. "We treated you unfairly. We put everything into Emily, and we ignored you. We thought we were doing what was best, but we were wrong." My mom's eyes brimmed with tears. "I see it now," she whispered. "Every time you tried to show us something, every time you needed us, we turned away. We thought Emily needed the attention more, that she was fragile, but it was you who carried strength all along. We failed you." For years, I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they'd make me feel whole. But standing there, I realized nothing could erase the past. "You can't undo it," I said quietly. "I raised myself in this house. I fought for every scrap of recognition, and I stopped waiting for your approval a long time ago." "There's the space down." My dad lowered his gaze, ashamed. "We just don't want to lose you now." I let the silence hang before answering. "Then stop pretending it never happened. Own it. Accept that Emily was your golden child, and I was the shadow you left behind. If you want a relationship with me now, it starts with honesty, not guilt." They both nodded, tears in their eyes. For the first time, I saw genuine humility in them. It didn't heal me completely, but it was the beginning of something real, something on my terms. Emily found out sooner than I expected. I wasn't the one to tell her our mother slipped up during a phone call. The next day, Emily stormed into my place, unannounced, her eyes blazing. "So that's it?" she spat. pacing my living room. They're turning on me now? After everything I've done, after all the years I carried this family's reputation, you've poisoned them against me. I stayed calm, leaning against the counter. No, Emily. They finally opened their eyes. That's not poison. That's truth. She laughed bitterly, almost manic. Truth? The truth is, I was always the better one. You're just jealous that they loved me more. Her words didn't sting the way they once would have. Instead, I just looked at her and said, exactly. They loved you more. And that's the difference. You were fed validation while I had to grow on starvation. But guess what? I thrived without it. That's why you're terrified. Now you've never stood without their applause. Now, Emily froze, her face twisting as if she wanted to scream but couldn't. Finally, she whispered, "You'll regret this." And then she slammed the door behind her. The irony was, she wasn't the villain because of me. She was the villain because of who she'd chosen to be all along. And deep down, I think she knew it. It didn't take long for Emily's life to start unraveling. Without the endless stream of praise and support she was used to, cracks began to show. Her so-called business venture that she'd begged me to invest in never took off. Word spread quickly among relatives and old family friends about her manipulative behavior, and people stopped picking up her calls. At work, things weren't much better. I later heard from a cousin who worked in the same industry that Emily's arrogance had caught up with her. She constantly boasted about her connections and belittled colleagues. But when management shifted and her protectors were no longer around, she was exposed. Projects slipped through her fingers, and promotions she thought were guaranteed never came. Meanwhile, my own world only grew brighter. The success of my company opened doors I never imagined: partnerships, speaking opportunities, and even mentorship roles where I could guide others who came from nothing like me. For once, I wasn't invisible. People saw me, not as Emily's sibling, but as myself. The biggest shift came at the next family reunion. Usually, Emily arrived first, soaking in attention. But this time, when she walked in, conversations barely paused. The spotlight wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. And the look on her face when she realized it, utter disbelief, mixed with fear, was something I'll never forget. She tried to interrupt, while relatives asked me questions, but no one seemed to care. For the first time in her golden child life, she was background noise. The final breaking point came at a charity gala hosted by one of our extended relatives. It was a formal event, filled with community leaders, business owners, and plenty of family. I had been invited as a guest speaker to talk about entrepreneurship and perseverance, a role I never thought I'd be asked to fill. Emily showed up uninvited. The moment she saw me standing at the podium, her expression hardened. I gave my speech, speaking honestly about the years I felt overlooked, about the quiet grind of building something when no one believed in me. The audience applauded, some even standing. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. But Emily couldn't stand it. She stood up in the middle of the applause and shouted, "He's lying! He's making himself the hero when he's not! He's twisting the truth to make me look bad!" The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. Instead of defending myself, I simply said, "Emily, no one here needed me to mention you. You brought yourself into this." The audience shifted uncomfortably, and a few relatives shook their heads in disappointment at her outburst. Someone from the event staff gently asked her to sit down, but she refused. "You all think he's some kind of success story, but I'm the one who deserved the chances. I'm the one who..." Her voice cracked under the weight of her own desperation. Finally, my uncle, who had never been afraid to speak bluntly, stood up and said, "Enough, Emily. You've had the spotlight long enough. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further." The room clapped not for her, but for shutting her down. Emily's face crumpled. She stormed out, heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. And just like that, her golden image shattered completely, not by anything I said, but by her own hand. In the weeks after the gala, everything shifted for good. Emily stopped showing up at family events altogether. Relatives no longer excused her behavior, and the pedestal she had lived on her whole life crumbled beneath her. The golden child had finally lost her shine, and not because of anything I forced, but because her entitlement was exposed for what it really was. My parents tried to reconcile the wreckage. They called me often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to apologize again. For the first time, they treated me like a son instead of a shadow. I didn't forgive everything. They couldn't erase decades of neglect with a few words. But I allowed myself to build a cautious relationship with them, this time on my terms. As for me, I kept moving forward, My company's success opened doors I never thought I'd walk through. I traveled, mentored young entrepreneurs, and even funded programs for kids who grew up being overlooked. Every time I helped someone like that, it felt like healing a piece of my younger self. Looking back, my revenge wasn't about humiliating Emily. It wasn't about making my parents regret their favoritism. It was about showing myself, that I was never less. I had been strong enough all along. The silence, the neglect, the dismissal, they had fueled me into becoming someone they could no longer ignore. And in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't the fortune I built or the recognition I finally received. It was watching the family who once overlooked me realize the truth. The shadow child they dismissed had become the one who outshone them all.